Week 9 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 12 defenses I'm ranking for this week. The first one, the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills here, one of the best defenses, no doubt about it, this season in fantasy football. And this week they got another slam dunk matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars that give up the third most fantasy points to defenses. So right here, we don't know if James Robinson's going to play for Jacksonville. And the Bills here, their defense is ball hawking D. They get to the quarterback, and once again, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be running for his life like he did last week at the Seattle Seahawks. And I could see the Bills find the end zone in this one and have a big fantasy day. The second defense I'm ranking this week is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers, it seems like each and every season where we get to the midway part of the year, this defense gets stronger. And that's been the case now over the last few weeks here for the Steelers. Week 5 versus Denver, 19 points allowed, 2 sacks, only throwing a fourth down stop. Week 6 versus Seattle, 20 points allowed, 5 sacks, a fumble recovery. And last week at Cleveland, they put a beating on Baker Mayfield in that offense. 10 points allowed, only 4 sacks, a fumble recovery, and 2 fourth down stops. So this week here, more of the same in my opinion for this Steelers defense with the Chicago Bears coming to town. And we know this Bear offense is pedestrian. We know they don't move the football well. And Justin Fields takes way too many sacks, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to defenses. And Pittsburgh's at home in this one, and I think they have a big fantasy day. And I got them in number 2. Number 3, the Indianapolis Colts. So the Colts see a great matchup on Thursday Night Football versus the New York Jets that give up the most fantasy points to defenses. And the Colts here, the last few weeks, they found their groove now. Week 6 versus Houston, 3 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 windows of fumble recovery. Week 7 at San Francisco, 18 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 windows, 2 fumble recoveries. And last week in a tough ball game versus Tennessee, they still made a few plays in that one. 28 points allowed, 3 sacks, and 2 interceptions. So I know Mike White had a monster ball game for the New York Jets in Week 8, but right here, this Colt team's at home. Thursday Night Football prime time, and I think Mike White was a one-hit wonder, in my opinion. Hey, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not, but I think this Colt defense makes some plays on White, and we even saw last week White turn the ball over twice. So in this one, a few turnovers I see happen, and at least a few sacks, and I like them this week. And number 3, number 4, the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams here, their defense is out of control now. Adding Von Miller to the mix to go with Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald, all pro defensive players and probably the 2 best defensive players at their position. So this defense, they wanted to take it up a notch, and that's exactly what they're doing. So the last 3 games have been pretty good for them. Week 6 at the Giants, 11 points allowed, 4 sacks, 3 in those, a fumble recovery, 2 fourth down stops. Week 7 versus Detroit, 19 points allowed, 2 sacks, 4 in those, and a fourth down stop. And last week versus Houston, they took their foot off the gas, late third, early fourth, because this game was a 38-0 game, I think it was. And then it finished 38-22 with the Rams getting the win. 22 points allowed, 5 sacks, and an hit. So this week here, Week 9 versus the Tennessee Titans on Sunday Night Football. We know Derrick Henry's out, and that's going to be a plus for this Ram defense, in my opinion. And they're going to try to tee off on Ryan Tannehill, which definitely could happen. And I think Tannehill's good for a few turnovers as well in this ball game. So right here, I got the Rams in number 4. Number 5, I got the New England Patriots. So the Patriots, their defense is starting to get into midseason form this year, especially the last 2 ball games for them. Week 7 versus the Jets, 13 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 windows, a fumble recovery, 2 fourth down stops. And Week 8 at the Chargers, a very high-powered offense. Some big plays in that one. 24 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 windows, and a touchdown. And right here, Week 9 at the Panthers, it's a great matchup for the Patriots here. The Panthers give up the 9th most fantasy points to defenses, and we don't know if Sam Darnold's going to play in this ball game with his concussion issue. So if P.J. Walker, the former XFL standout quarterback, starts, I think it's going to be a long day for him, and this Patriot defense is definitely going to feast. Number 6, the New Orleans Saints. So the Saints here, they need their defense more than ever now, especially with Jameis Winston out. And this defense, they've been stepping up over the last 3 weeks here. Week 5 at Washington, 22 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 windows, 2 fourth down stops. Week 7 at Seattle, 10 points allowed, 5 sacks, and 4 fourth down stops. And last week versus a very tough Tampa Bay Buccaneer offense, I know they still gave up 27 points allowed, 3 sacks though, 2 windows, a fumble recovery, and a game-clinching pick 6. So right here, Week 9 versus the Atlanta Falcons, they can do more of the same, in my opinion, here is the Saints. Matt Ryan, he looked pretty lost last week without Calvin Ridley. And Ridley, we don't know when he's going to come back. So anyway, this Saint team, they pride themselves on defense and making stops. And in this game versus Atlanta, in a home game as well, once again in New Orleans, I think they have a double-digit fantasy day. And it's a good one for them at number 6. Number 7, the Miami Dolphins. So the Dolphins, I've mentioned in other videos earlier this week that they're a 1-week play here, is this Dolphin team versus the Houston Texans that give up the 4th most fantasy points to defenses. So the Dolphins, the pluses for them, they're at home. Houston, they've been horrible, even though I know Miami's been horrible as well this season at 1-5. But I think the Dolphins can make a few plays. They still got a decent amount of pass rushers that could get to the quarterback. And David Mills this season, he's been up and down, but for the most part, he's had down games. And I think, once again, this will be one here in Week 9. Number 8, the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens, I thought their defense was kicking into gear, but that wasn't the case in Week 7 when they got blown out 41-17 versus the Cincinnati Bengals. But this week here in Week 9 versus the Minnesota Vikings, I think they can make a few plays on the Vikings. The Vikings, their offense has been hit or miss as well this season. One week, they're scoring 34, 35 points. And then last week versus the Dallas Cowboy team that went in there in Minnesota with a backup quarterback and beat them, with the defense holding them down to, I believe, 16 points. So right here, I don't know what Viking offense is going to show up, but Baltimore definitely, they got ripped up by Harbaugh on the bye week after getting embarrassed and giving up 41 points. I think they come out with fire and desire in this ball game here in Week 9 versus Minnesota. And another plus is obviously they're at home. So this week, I got them at number 8. Number 9, the Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys this season, they're taking pride in defense. After last year, they were one of the worst defenses statistically in all of NFL history. But this year here, they've had a few good fantasy days the last few weeks. Week 5 versus the Giants, 20 points allowed, 2 windows, a pick 6, and a 4th down stop. Week 6 at the New England Patriots, 29 points allowed, 2 sacks, an into, a fumble recovery, and a block kick. And Week 8 at the Vikings, only 16 points given up, and a sack and a 4th down stop. So right here, Week 9, Cowboys, they go back home here versus the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos give up the 13th most fantasy points to defenses. And this Bronco offense, they just don't look right, even though I could see the Broncos put up points and yards in this game. But Teddy Bridgewater, he's a quarterback that's definitely hit or miss and inconsistent. And I think this game, the Dallas Cowboys could make a few plays and even maybe take a house call to the end zone on a pick 6, because we know Trevon Diggs, that's what he's looking for, the big breakaway pick 6 here this season. And he's had some success with it, and then sometimes he's got burned. But in this one, I could see that definitely happening, especially at home for Dallas. So I got him at number 9. Number 10, the Arizona Cardinals. So the Cardinals here, they got a pretty decent matchup versus division rival, the San Francisco 49ers. And we saw these two teams play in Week 5. And the Cardinals had a good game, 10 points allowed, 2 sacks, an into, and 4 4th down stops. But I know Trey Lance was the starter in that Week 5 game, but Jimmy G will be the starter, obviously, here in Week 9. But this Cardinal team, they're pretty solid as a defensive unit. Week 6 at Cleveland, a big game as well. 14 points allowed, 5 sacks, an into, 2 fumble recoveries, 3 4th down stops. Week 7 versus Houston, 3 points allowed only, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery, and 2 4th down stops. And right here, Week 8 versus Green Bay, not a good game at all, really. 24 points allowed, a sack, and 2 4th down stops. But I think they get it right here at San Francisco. And I could see this be a type of low-scoring game once again between these two division rivals like it was in Week 5. But I got the Cardinals at number 10. Number 11, the Las Vegas Raiders. I know the Raiders, they got to make the cross-country trip here to the New York Giants this week here. But the Giants, they got a lot of problems going on. Saquon Barkley, he's most likely out with a COVID issue now. And his ankle, we don't even know if he's 100%, even though, in my opinion, Booker's been a great fill-in for Barkley. Tani, we don't know if he's going to play. He's banged up with the hand. And Kenny Golladay, another lost season, it seems like, for him with the injury. So a lot of things going the Las Vegas Raiders' way. Defensive side of things, even though I know Henry Ruggs, he got released, and he was a huge weapon for this offense. But right here, I think this Raider defense, they're getting better. They're coming off a bye week, so they're well-rested and should be prepared, in my opinion. And Daniel Jones, he does turn over the ball a lot. So even if they got a cross-country trip here, is Vegas, I think their defense can make a few plays in this game. And the last couple weeks since Gruden left, Week 6 at Denver, 24 points allowed, 5 sacks, 3 intos, a fumble recovery, 2 fourth down stops. And week 7 versus Philly, 22 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, and a fourth down stop. So the Giants give up the 11th most fantasy points to defenses. And I think in this one, the Raiders, they could get anywhere from 8 to 10 fantasy points. And the 12th and final defense I'm ranking this week is the Los Angeles Chargers. So the Chargers, last week I was big on them versus New England, but they didn't really do much in that game. Only 5 fantasy points, 21 points allowed, a sack, a fumble recovery, and a fourth down stop. But this week here, Philly, it's a big ball game for this Charger team. Chargers got off to the hot start at 4-1, but now they've dropped down to 4-3. But this Philadelphia Eagle team, their receivers aren't really doing much this season. At running back, obviously, Miles Sanders is out, even though I don't think it's a big blow for them. Boston Scott has been pretty decent, and Gainwell as a backup. But anyway, I think they can make a few plays in this game. And we've seen a lot this season. The Philadelphia Eagles get off to slow starts. So right here, if this Charger team could get off to an early lead, they can make this offense one-dimensional once again. And I think they can make a few plays in this game as the Chargers. So I got them at number 12. So that's the top 12 defenses I'm ranking for Week 9 of the fantasy football season.